My name is Valeria. I'm 64, and for the past 7 years, I've lived a quiet life in my little cedar shingled house by the lake. Most people who meet me think I'm a retired librarian scraping by on a modest pension. That's exactly the way I want it. The truth is, I'm a widow with a net worth of just over $11 million, thanks to my late husband Louis's brilliant investments and my own careful hands. But after he passed, I decided to keep that part of my life hidden. You'd be amazed at how quickly people's behavior changes when they think you have something they can take. I wanted to know who truly cared for me, not my bank account. That's why, when my only son Eric married Priya, a beautiful woman from Tamil Nadu with flawless eyeliner and a smile that never seemed to reach her eyes, I didn't tell her or anyone else about my finances. I played the part of the modest, slightly lonely mother, always bringing homemade jam to family events and wearing the same soft cardigan. So when the invitation came last week, family dinner, our place. 6:30 p.m., don't be late, Mom. I was hopeful. Eric's been distant for years, our phone calls short, his affection filtered through polite obligation. But maybe this was a chance. I arrived with a pecan pie still warm from the oven, its sugary scent curling up into the crisp autumn air. Eric opened the door, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair longer than I remembered. He hugged me quickly, like a man shaking hands at a conference. Behind him, Priya appeared in a silk dress the color of pomegranates, her black hair cascading over one shoulder. "Valeria," she said warmly, though her eyes flicked to the pie in my hands like it was a thrift store trinket she didn't want. The table was set beautifully linen napkins, polished cutlery, a faint aroma of cinnamon and cardamom drifting from the kitchen. A vase of marigolds sat in the center, their bright orange petals almost glowing in the candlelight. We made small talk over appetizers. Or rather, Priya talked, Eric nodded, and I listened. She told me about the new yoga studio she'd joined, her plans to renovate the guest bathroom, and the upcoming trip they were taking to Santorini, something I hadn't been told about before tonight. Halfway through the main course, lamb curry with saffron rice, Priya set down her fork, tilted her head, and smiled sweetly at me. "You know, Valeria," she began, "I've been thinking, you should get a job." I blinked. "A job?" "Yes. Something to keep you active, you know? Maybe at Amazon. They're always hiring in the warehouse. My friend's mother works there. She says it's great exercise. Plus, you could use the independence." The words hung in the air like a bad smell. Eric didn't look up. He was cutting his naan into tiny, perfect squares, as though this conversation had nothing to do with him. "I am independent," I said, my voice even. Priya's smile tightened. "Well, of course, but it's just, you've been living alone for years now, without much income. I think it would be good for you to pull your own weight." I laughed. I couldn't help it. A bright, genuine laugh that seemed to surprise them both. Priya's brows knit together. "What's funny?" "Oh, honey," I said, my tone light, but my eyes locked on hers. "You really don't want to go down this road with me." She flushed slightly, but leaned back, folding her arms. "I'm just trying to help." Eric still said nothing. Not a word to defend me. Not even a glance of solidarity. That was the moment I knew Priya had decided I was a burden and Eric had decided to let her think that. I placed my napkin gently on the table, my smile never wavering. "You know, Priya, it's good you're so concerned about independence. Because I have a feeling you're going to need a new place to live very soon." Her smile faltered for the first time all evening. I stood, picked up my pie, and walked toward the door. "I'll leave you two to your dinner. Enjoy Santorini." And with that, I stepped into the cool night air, the autumn wind lifting my hair like an old friend's hand. My fingers were steady on the steering wheel as I drove away, but inside, something had shifted. If they thought they knew me, the meek, broke little widow, they were about to meet someone else entirely. The game had just begun. 3 days after that dinner, a soft knock came at the door of my modest apartment, the one with the creaky radiator that sings at midnight and the view of the alley where the grocer stacks his crates. I rent this place month to month even though I own 3 buildings across town and a sliver of a wind farm in New Mexico. It's my costume, the cardigan, the chipped mugs, the crooked picture of Luis and me on the pier. From here, I can watch people reveal themselves. Mom? It's me. Eric's voice, hesitant. Not the fast talking tone he uses when he's selling software or explaining away Priya's sharp edges. Just my boy, knocking on a mother's door. I counted to 5 before opening, long enough to steady my face. He stood there with the same blue shadows under his eyes he had as a child after nightmares. No Priya. That already told me the visit was real. Come in, I said, stepping back. Mind the rug, it curls. He glanced around like he was seeing the place for the first time. The thrifted sofa, the little bookshelf that sags in the middle, the kettle sputtering on the stove. His brow creased. You left dinner so abruptly. Priya says you're upset. I just wanted to talk. I poured tea into 2 mismatched cups. Upset is a word, I said. So is disappointed. And awake. He sank onto the edge of the sofa, knees apart, elbows on his thighs, the posture of a man bracing for impact. For a moment, I saw the boy who brought me wilted dandelions, promising they were sunflowers for small people. I almost softened. Then I remembered Priya's voice, go to work and stop being a parasite. And Eric's silence swallowing me whole. Why did you laugh? He asked finally. When she told you to get a job at Amazon. That look, it sounded cruel. I know. But why laugh? Because it was funny, I said lightly. Because the performance had gone on long enough. He frowned. What performance? I set his cup down, then mine, and sat across from him. The one where I pretend to be poor. He blinked. Twice. What? I've been living modestly by choice, I said. Not for lack of means. To see who loved me when there was nothing to gain. To see who would bend and who would break. I thought I had more time to keep the mask on, but your wife, well, she's not patient. He stared at me like I'd started speaking a language he'd forgotten. Mom, your pension is dwarfed by my portfolio, I said. Luis was brilliant and careful. I learned from him. Between the real estate, the equities, the boring bonds nobody likes to brag about, and a few private placements, my net worth is just over $11 million. The radiator hissed. Somewhere outside, a bottle rolled, clinked, and settled. Eric's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment, the way it did when he was trying not to cry at 10 years old. You're kidding. It wasn't an accusation. It was a lost child hoping the dark hallway leads to the kitchen light. I shook my head. No, he let out a breath that became a laugh, and then wasn't a laugh at all. All these years, you took the bus to our house. You wore those old shoes, I like those shoes. We offered to get you a newer phone, and you said yours texted just fine. He sank back. God. I reached for the small wooden box on the shelf, slid out the bottom panel, and pulled a single folder. I never keep much paper here. This apartment is for theater, but I keep enough. I handed him a thin stack, a redacted statement or 2, a notarized letter from my lawyer friend Aisha confirming the blind trust, the deed to an apartment building with the rents marked in tidy penciled columns. He read silently. I watched his face cycle through disbelief, calculation, shame, and the first flicker of something like relief. Not because I'm rich, that part sits awkwardly on him, but because the story he's been told about his mother might not be true, and that means other stories might be wrong too. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, voice small. Because I wanted to know you without the noise, I said. After your father died, people started performing kindness at me. Do you know what that looks like? It's careful hands and bright smiles and the quiet measuring of your furniture. It's the word generous used like bait. I decided to let the world think I had nothing so I could see who watered me and who only watered where the grass looked expensive. His jaw tightened. You think I think you're my son, I said gently. I think you've let a woman narrate me to you until you stopped hearing my own voice. He stared at the wall. She said you were fragile, that you needed tough love, that it would activate your independence. The phrase left his mouth sour. God, I parroted that, didn't I? Once or twice, I said. No use bruising him when he was already bruising himself. He was quiet for a long time. The kettle tapped as it cooled. Downstairs, mister. Figueroa's radio fuzzed through a bolero. Eric rubbed his palms together like he was trying to start a fire from shame. Priya, he began. She can be intense, but manipulative. He said the word like it had thorns. Intensity without kindness is theater, I said. Let me tell you what I've seen. I told him about the small edits, the way Priya scheduled their trips on my birthday, the way she spoke about me in rooms I stood in, like I was a task to be delegated. How she wrapped cruelty in wellness jargon, boundaries, growth, financial hygiene. How she praised self sufficiency while leaning into my non existent dependence. How she very carefully never let us be alone long enough to talk without her curating the air. Eric's face tightened. He remembered things as I spoke, messages he'd ignored, dinners rescheduled, the time Priya told him I insisted on watching their dog for a week. I had said I could do 2 days, and how he'd thanked me like it was a favor to me. He remembered the night she deleted my voicemail before he'd heard it. It had stress in it, she'd said, as if compassion were a contaminant. He covered his face with both hands. I'm so sorry. I'm not asking for an apology, I said. I'm telling you what's true. He dropped his hands. But I let her speak to you like that. At dinner. God, Mom, I just sat there. Silence is a statement, I said. But a statement can be amended. He looked up. When he told her to find a new place to live, were you serious? Completely. A flicker of panic crossed his features. Where am I supposed to, Eric? I said, and he stopped. When I say she needs a new place to live, I mean exactly that. I'm not evicting my son. I am evicting a behavior. You may choose which side of it you stand on. He swallowed. What does that mean? It means I've tolerated the performance long enough. Priya has mistaken my restraint for weakness. She has used my love for you as a shield for her contempt for me. She has called me a parasite while eating a meal from dishes I bought you too. She has stood in my home and measured the curtains with her eyes. I am done. Done? How? I'm not vindictive, I said. But I am thorough. I let the smallest smile slip. Your lease is in your name alone because I arranged it when your credit hit a rough patch last year, remember that? Priya never noticed because she never reads paperwork she can't weaponize. I'll have the building manager, Dimitri, switch the locks the day she moves her things. I'll also be collecting evidence of harassment and defamation. Aisha's handling that part. And for the record, I won't be funding Santorini. His ears reddened. She booked it assuming you would. Of course she did. He stared at his hands. What do you want me to do? Wake up, I said simply. Look with your own eyes. Speak with your own mouth. Decide with your own spine. I'm not telling you to leave your wife. I'm telling you that the cost of my presence in your life is dignity. Mine, and if you'll let it grow back, yours. He let out a long breath. The kind that empties a man. When he looked at me again, something had shifted. Not everything. God doesn't fix people in an afternoon, but enough. The fog in his eyes had thinned. You really have $11 million? He asked, a little dazed humor returning. Give or take a few market jitters, I said. And no, I'm not buying you a boat. He actually laughed, brief and boyish. Then he sobered. If I tell her, she'll rage. She'll say you're testing us, manipulating us. She can believe whatever keeps her warm at night, I said. But understand me, Eric, I'm not a piñata for her temper. She has chosen contempt repeatedly. There will be consequences. What kind? The kind that are quiet and legal and permanent, I said. I won't announce them at dinner. I won't humiliate her in public. But the days of her walking through my life like she owns the deed are over. She will be responsible for her behavior. He nodded slowly, absorbing the sentence the way a man absorbs a prognosis. With fear, yes, but also with the relief that comes from naming the illness. Outside, the alley filled with afternoon light. Mrs. Alvarez from 3B shuffled by with her terrier, Pippin. She waved through the window like she always does, and I waved back. Eric followed the gesture, surprised. You know your neighbors. I always do, I said. How else would I know where the kindness lives? He stood, tea untouched, and pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than courtesy. His chest shook once against my shoulder. I'm going to fix this, he murmured. I hope so, I said into his shirt. But even if you don't, I will. When he left, I locked the door and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. The radiator hissed, the kettle ticked, the city breathed. I thought of the girl Priya must have been once, and the edges she sharpened to survive. I thought of how easy it is to confuse sharpness with strength. Then I called Aisha. It's time, I said. And somewhere across town, a fuse that had been patiently waiting finally found its spark. Point 3 days after my talk with Eric, the phone rang just as I was stirring honey into my morning tea. The caller ID flashed Priya's name. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity and perhaps a little wicked satisfaction won out. I lifted the receiver. Good morning, Priya. Her voice cut through the line like a blade. Don't you good morning me? Is it true? I swirled my spoon, listening to the faint clink against the porcelain. Is what true? Don't play games. Eric told me. $11 million. You've been lying to us all these years, pretending you're some sad little old woman with nothing. You made us feel sorry for you. I chuckled, low and amused. I never asked you to feel sorry for me, dear. That was entirely your own idea. You let us believe you were struggling. Do you know how humiliating it is to find out you've been living modestly? By choice? Yes, I imagine that would be humiliating for someone who's built their entire opinion of me on the assumption I'm beneath them. Her inhale was sharp. You're unbelievable. Thank you, I said sweetly. I'll be over in an hour. We should have this conversation in person. When I arrived, I made sure every detail of my appearance was a calculated statement. A tailored cream silk suit, diamond studs from my last anniversary with Luis, a gold watch worth more than their SUV, and a burgundy Italian leather handbag that could pay their property taxes for a year. The look on Priya's face when she opened the door, half shock, half fury, was delicious. Her eyes swept over me like she was seeing me for the first time, and I could tell she didn't like what she saw, a woman she couldn't condescend to. Nice outfit, she said, her lips pulling into something that wanted to be a smirk, but fell short. Thank you, I said, stepping past her into the living room. It's been years since I dressed for an occasion. Eric was on the couch, arms folded, watching us both. He didn't look at Priya the way he used to. There was suspicion there now and something else hurt. I didn't sit right away. Instead, I walked slowly around the room, my heels clicking softly on the hardwood. Lovely home, I murmured, though it could use a little work. The trim is peeling by the windows. Priya crossed her arms. You didn't come here to talk about the trim. Get to the point. Very well. I took a seat, placing my handbag beside me. Since you're so interested in my finances, perhaps it's time I take an interest in yours. Her brows knit. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, pulling a manila folder from the bag, that I've spoken to my lawyer. And while I was there, I also looked into some interesting matters, like your little visit to a certain elder law attorney last month. Eric frowned. What is she talking about? She, I said, leaning forward, is talking about Priya's attempt to have me declared mentally incapacitated. You claimed I was making impulsive financial decisions and that I needed a conservator, someone to control my assets. And naturally, you volunteered to make sure Eric got what was his before I could blow it all. Eric's head snapped toward his wife. You what? Priya's lips parted. I was just thinking about the future. Oh, and it gets better, I interrupted, sliding a stack of papers across the coffee table. Here we have your personal debt, roughly $30,000 in credit cards, store accounts, and a payday loan. And here, I tapped another sheet, are the withdrawals from your joint account with Eric that you funneled into your sister's so-called business in Chennai. The same sister who's been starting a company for 3 years and has yet to register a single tax document. Eric's face was a mix of anger and disbelief. You told me you were helping her buy medical equipment. Priya's eyes darted toward him. No, I said, my voice calm but cutting. You were hiding it. Just like you hid your trip to that lawyer. Just like you hid your plan to try to take control of my estate. She spun toward me, her composure cracking. You've been spying on me. No, dear, I said, leaning back. I've been protecting my family. There's a difference. I let the silence stretch before I added, and since we're clearing the air, let's talk about this house. Eric looked between us. What about it? This house, I said, letting the words sink in, belongs to me. I bought it 5 years ago when your credit was in shambles after your failed startup, Eric. The mortgage is in my name. The deed is in my name. Priya, your name appears nowhere on any legal document related to this property. Eric's mouth dropped open. Priya's eyes narrowed. That's not true. I reached into my bag again and pulled out a crisp copy of the deed. I placed it in front of her. Read it. Her hands trembled as she scanned the page. I'm giving you 30 minutes, I said softly, but firmly. Pack your belongings and leave. Today. Priya's head snapped up. You can't do that. Oh, I can, I replied. And I will. You see, I've been patient. I've listened while you called me names, mocked my life, and plotted behind my back. But patience is not weakness. You crossed a line when you tried to steal from me under the guise of protecting your husband. Eric was silent, his jaw tight, his gaze locked on the floor. 30 minutes, I repeated, standing. The clock starts now. And with that, I left them in their living room, the weight of truth pressing down like a stone. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Priya's voice rise, shrill, desperate, before it cut off into a strained, muffled argument. It wasn't the end of the war, but it was the first, decisive victory. I had known Priya wouldn't leave quietly, but even I underestimated just how quickly she would move to poison the air around me. She was gone from the house by that evening, 2 massive suitcases, a garment bag, and a box of heels she'd worn once before shoving into the closet. Eric helped her carry things to the rideshare car, though he didn't kiss her goodbye. She left without looking back. For exactly 20 hours, the world was still. Then the first call came. Valeria, my cousin Helena said, her voice already taut with judgment. What on earth did you do to poor Priya? She says you threw her out without warning, without cause. Like some madwoman. I stirred my tea slowly, the silver spoon ringing against the cup. Is that what she told you? She said you've been lying about your finances for years, pretending you were destitute, making everyone pity you. She said you trick people to test them like you're some twisted scientist experimenting on your own family, and that you've been unstable for a long time. Her pause was deliberate, an opening for confession. I only said, that's an interesting story. Helena exhaled sharply. Valeria, is it true? I looked down at my notepad and wrote her name under a fresh heading, believes without question. By lunchtime, the phone was ringing again. Cruel, my nephew Stephen spat before I'd even said hello. You're cruel, Anthal. You've humiliated Eric. Thrown his wife out on the street. Over what? Some petty power trip. I see, I said evenly. That's what she told you. It's what everyone's saying, he shot back. I made another note. The calls kept coming in waves, an unending tide of condemnation. My second cousin Lorraine from New Jersey called in her best concerned relative voice, the kind that drips with sanctimony. Sweetheart, if you're having mental issues, maybe you should seek help. Priya says she was just trying to keep you safe. You know how fragile you've been since Louis passed. I thanked her for her concern, asked after her grandchildren, and hung up. Lorraine, gentle condemnation. From Arizona, my niece Paula rang with a feigned neutrality that fooled no one. Val, I'm not taking sides, she began, but Priya says you've been hoarding money just to watch your family struggle. That you could have helped Eric years ago, but chose not to. I said. And you believe her. Silence. Then, I believe she's telling her truth. I wrote her down under diplomatic, still hostile. By the end of the week, Priya's campaign was running like a well-oiled machine. Her rumors were everywhere, each version more embellished than the last. I was, according to the gossip, a manipulative miser who enjoyed watching her own son suffer. A senile woman making erratic financial decisions who needed professional oversight. A bitter widow who lived for drama and tested her family's loyalty like some deranged game show host. And, most outrageously, the kind of person who feeds neighbors' pets human food as a control thing. That one was almost comical. Mr. Figueroa's sick cat had been prescribed chicken broth by the vet. But in Priya's telling, it became some bizarre act of dominance. The reach was impressive. Even old acquaintances I barely remembered were calling with thinly veiled barbs disguised as concern. Valeria, dear, I heard you've been under stress, one old church friend murmured. If you ever need to stay with someone for a while, just say the word. Translation, we heard you've lost your mind and can't be trusted alone. Eric called twice that week. The first time, his voice was guarded, like a man trying to keep balance on a swaying bridge. She's talking to everyone, Mom. Relatives, friends, even people from my work. They're calling me asking if you're okay. Asking if you need, help. I know, I said. You know? I've been keeping track, I told him, my pen scratching as I added another name to the list. Every color, every reaction. You'd be amazed what people reveal when they think they're choosing sides. The second call came 2 days later. His voice was different, tired, but also sharper. She's saying you're dangerous, that you're trying to control me. That's why you kicked her out. And what do you think? I asked. There was a pause. I think she's twisting things, but she's convincing, and she's not slowing down. Good, I said. Good. Yes, I said. Because people who lie like this can't stop themselves. They overreach. They contradict themselves. The more she talks, the more she gives me. By Saturday, I had 2 full columns in my notebook, those who ask questions and those who don't. The first column was short, Michael, my grandson, who'd send a brief but telling text. I know she's lying. Hang in there. An old friend of Louis's who called just to say, if you need backup, you've got it. A distant cousin in Vancouver who messaged privately, not buying a word of it. Call me if you need an alibi. The second column, those who don't, was twice as long, filled with names of people I'd once hosted for holidays, helped through crises, even lent money to. Their silence, or worse, their eager judgment, told me exactly where I stood. And I was fine with that. Because while Priya was busy playing for the court of public opinion, I was assembling my case for the court that mattered. Every slanderous word she spoke, every accusation, every exaggerated anecdote, these were pieces of rope she was wrapping around her own ankles. She thought she was tarnishing my name. She didn't realize she was building my evidence file. And when the time came to pull it tight, I would do it calmly, legally, permanently. Café Lorenz was quiet that morning, the way I like it. The clink of cups, the low hum of conversation, the hiss of milk steaming, background music for serious discussions. I picked the corner table by the big window overlooking the park, the one that let me see people coming before they saw me. It was cold outside, the kind of cold that turns breaths into brief, ghostly clouds. I arrived early, as always. My coffee was already in front of me, dark roast, black, and the scent curled up like a studying hand. Eric arrived 10 minutes late, wearing a navy coat that looked more like armor than warmth. His shoulders were hunched, and his eyes carried the weight of too many sleepless nights. He didn't bother with small talk. She's coming for my job, Mom, he said, pulling off his gloves and dropping them on the table. Priya's been calling people at my company. Not just gossiping, making statements. She's saying I've been emotionally abusive toward you, that I've been covering up some kind of history between us. I didn't blink. And your colleagues believe this? He shook his head quickly. I don't know. No one said they do. But it's hanging there. Even if they don't believe it, the doubt's planted. My boss pulled me aside yesterday, asked if everything at home was stable. That's corporate speak for, we don't want your personal mess spilling into the office. I sipped my coffee. And she's not stopping there, is she? Eric looked down, jaw tight. She's meeting with lawyers, trying to find a way to get her name tied to the house. She's saying you bought it as a marital asset, a gift to our marriage, so she's entitled to half. She even hinted that you used my money for it, which is ridiculous. Which is irrelevant, I corrected. She knows she doesn't have a case. But she doesn't need to win in court. She just needs to make the process ugly and expensive, so you're too tired to fight. His eyes flicked up to mine. And she'll keep hitting me at work, so I can't even focus enough to fight back. I reached into my handbag, pulled out my phone, and slid it across the table. Look at her social media. Eric unlocked the screen and started scrolling. There she was, smiling in cafes, posing in new clothes, posting sunset shots with captions about self-empowerment and removing toxic influences. There were cryptic posts about in-laws who destroy families and fake relatives. But something was missing. Eric frowned. No mention of me. Not one, I said. Scroll back further. 3 months. 4. Still nothing. She talks about friends, about her yoga teacher, her sister's new business, even her favorite brand of herbal tea, but not her husband. Not the man she claims to love and defend. He kept scrolling, slower now, absorbing it. It's like I never existed. It's exactly that, I said. She erased you the moment she realized the money wasn't hers to take. This isn't about family. It's about access. She lost her access, and now she's burning everything she can touch on her way out. He set the phone down, the screen face up. I feel like an idiot. I kept telling myself she just misunderstood you. That if I explained, she'd calm down. She understood me perfectly, I said. That's the problem. Eric rubbed his eyes. So what do we do? I can't keep living like this, waiting for the next phone call from HR, wondering who's been told what, worrying about court letters showing up at the door. I leaned forward, folding my hands. Eric, I've been collecting evidence for 3 years. Not just since this latest mess. 3 years. Every debt she's hidden, every false story, every attempt to isolate you from me. I have screenshots, receipts, witness statements, paper trails that lead straight to her and her sister. It's all organized and dated. His brow furrowed. 3 years. Yes, because I knew her type the moment I met her. I just didn't know how far she'd be willing to go. I paused, and I wanted you to see her clearly before I acted. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling a breath that seemed to take some of the tension with it. Well, I see her now. I gave a small nod. Good. That means we're ready. Ready for what? Ready to stop letting her control the story, I said. We go on the offensive. Public enough to destroy her credibility, legal enough to be airtight, and precise enough to make sure she can't recover. Eric stared at me for a moment. Then, slowly, I watched something shift in his posture. His shoulders squared, his jaw set. His eyes lost the flicker of uncertainty that had been there for months. A decisive blow, he said. Yes, I agreed. One she won't see coming, but won't be able to escape from. He nodded. Tell me what you need from me. Outside, the bare branches of the park trees scratched against a pale winter sky. The clouds were heavy with the promise of snow. A storm was coming. But for the first time, my son was standing beside me, ready to face it head dash on. It was a cold, gray Tuesday when the call came. I was at my kitchen counter, slicing pears for a tart, when the phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Valeria Montrose, the voice asked, deep and formal. Yes, this is Detective Harris with the city police. We've received a complaint we need to speak with you about. Are you able to come to the station this afternoon? There was a pause before he continued, his tone cautious, but direct. The report is for alleged abuse of an elderly person. The complainant claims you've been subjected to ongoing emotional and financial abuse by your son, Eric Montrose. I set the knife down very carefully. Elderly? I repeated, my voice calm but edged with something colder. Yes, ma'am. It took me a moment to process the audacity. Priya hadn't just whispered in dark corners or spread lies through family chat groups. She'd gone official. She'd put her signature on a statement to law enforcement. Detective Harris, I said smoothly, I'll be there at 3 o'clock. And I'll be bringing my attorney. Aisha arrived an hour later, her presence like a storm contained in a navy blue suit. She'd been my attorney for years and had the kind of mind that cut through falsehood like a scalpel. She's overplayed her hand, Aisha said as she laid her files on my kitchen table. Criminal accusations? That's the one move she can't spin away from once the truth is on record. We began reviewing the arsenal I'd built over the years, bank statements showing Eric had never withdrawn a cent from my accounts. Email and text screenshots of Priya discussing ways to have me declared incompetent, with phrases like, once we get control, we can fix everything. Detailed records of her $30,000 in personal debt and the money she funneled into her sister's sham business overseas. Screenshots of her contacting lawyers to find legal loopholes to seize my assets. 2 signed witness statements from my neighbor and a family friend who'd overheard her threatening to ruin me if I didn't hand over what's rightfully theirs. Aisha topped the stack of documents. By the time we're done, the detective will have no choice but to turn the investigation around. The precinct was as I remembered it, sterile floors, fluorescent lights, the faint smell of burnt coffee. We were shown into a glass-walled conference room. Detective Harris sat at the head of the table, a folder in front of him. Mrs. Montrose, thank you for coming in, he began politely. I just need to ask you some questions about the allegations. Before we start, Aisha interjected smoothly, we'd like you to review this. She slid the thick folder across the table like she was laying down a royal flush. Harris opened it. His eyes scanned the first few pages, Priya's own words in black and white, her schemes spelled out with smug certainty. These messages, he muttered, half to himself. Make her look incapable so we can protect the estate. Protect, Aisha said with a sharp smile, is her euphemism for steal. Harris turned to the financial records, his brow furrowing. This is her debt? Every cent, I said. Debt she hid from her husband. Money she transferred to her sister, who happens to be under investigation for tax fraud in Chennai. We went page by page, document by document. My voice never rose, never faltered. This wasn't a performance. It was a dismantling. Finally, Aisha placed the witness statements in front of him. Two separate individuals overheard her threatening Mrs. Montrose, both willing to testify under oath. This was not concern for her mother-in-law's well-being. This was a calculated attempt at financial exploitation. Harris leaned back in his chair. The suspicion he'd walked in with had shifted into something else, determination. I'm going to need a few minutes, he said, gathering the file. He left the room. Through the glass, I watched him cross the bullpen and disappear into another office. 20 minutes passed, then 30. When he returned, his demeanor had changed entirely. Mrs. Montrose, thank you for your cooperation. Based on the documentation you've provided and corroborating information we've just confirmed, we will be opening a case into your daughter-in-law's activities. Possible charges include attempted financial exploitation, fraud, and filing a false police report. I didn't gloat. I simply said, she's quite thorough in leaving evidence. You'll have no trouble building the case. He nodded. Our officers are en route to bring her in now. She'll be booked today. By the time Aisha and I left the station, the winter light was already fading. We were halfway to my apartment when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and smiled. Arrest confirmed. She's in custody. I looked out the window at the streets as the first flakes of snow began to fall. 3 years of patience. 3 years of documenting every slight, every scheme, every lie. And now, the very net Priya had tried to cast around me was wrapped tight around her own ankles. The storm had broken. And for once, I wasn't the one standing in the rain. It had been 5 days since Priya's arrest. The phone still rang from time to time, hesitant voices from relatives who had been silent when I needed them, now calling to check in or see how I was holding up. I let most go to voicemail. Some relationships were not worth reviving. The family group chats had shifted from loud, self-righteous declarations to awkward silence. A few messages trickled in safe, neutral comments about the weather or photos of someone's dog, but everyone knew the air had changed. That morning, I called Eric. Meet me at 4 o'clock, I told him. Where, he asked, sounding wary. I'll text you the address, I said. And wear something warm, you'll want to step out onto the balcony. The building stood like a quiet sentinel over the financial district, sleek glass, brushed steel, and a lobby that smelled faintly of fresh lilies from the weekly floral arrangement. The concierge greeted me by name, as he always did. When Eric walked in, he slowed just inside the revolving doors, looking up at the soaring ceiling and the massive crystal chandelier. This is where we're meeting, he asked. His voice carried both confusion and something sharper, wariness. Yes, I said simply. Come upstairs. We rode in silence to the 37th floor. When the elevator doors opened, we stepped into a private vestibule with polished wood paneling and a single painting on the wall, a gift from Luis on our 25th anniversary. I unlocked the double doors. The moment Eric stepped inside, he froze. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the skyline in every direction, the late afternoon sun spilling across a living room larger than his entire house. A grand piano gleamed by the corner window. The walls were lined with art, some bold, modern pieces, others that Luis and I had collected over decades. This, his voice caught. This is yours. It has been for 22 years, I said. Luis and I bought it just before you graduated from university. I've lived here the whole time. He turned to me, disbelief flickering across his face. All those years, you told me you were in a modest apartment. You let me believe you were living on next to nothing. I said softly. By choice. I needed to know who would stand by me for who I was, not for what I could give them. That's why I never showed you this place. He walked slowly through the living room, running his hand along the back of the leather sofa, pausing to look out over the city. Mom, I almost lost myself with her. I kept trying to be the peacemaker, to believe she had good intentions. I wanted to believe we could make it work if I just tried harder. But she was exactly who she showed herself to be from the beginning. I finished for him. He looked down, shame flickering in his eyes. I didn't see it. I know, I said, not unkindly. And that's why I didn't push harder. You had to see it for yourself. But hear me now, I will never accept another woman like her into my life. Not for you, not for anyone. We walked through the penthouse together. I showed him the library, the small winter garden Luis had built for me, the balcony with its view over the river. It's beautiful, he said quietly. It's home, I replied. And you've never been here until today. That's on me. I wanted to test people, to guard myself. But in doing that, I put distance between us that didn't need to be there. He turned to me. No more lies, Mom. No more tests. We start over, just as mother and son. I studied him for a moment, the weariness that was slowly giving way to something steadier, stronger. No more masks, I said. Just us. We sat in the living room as the sun dipped and the city lights came on one by one. We didn't talk about the case, or Priya, or the chaos she had stirred. We talked about the years we'd lost in half-truths and politeness, about the fishing trips he used to take with his father, about the way Luis would always hum the same tune when he cooked pasta. For the first time in years, I saw my son as the boy I'd raised, not the man tangled in someone else's games. The bond we'd lost began to stitch itself back together that evening, not in grand declarations, but in quiet understanding. And as the city sparkled beneath us, I knew the door I'd kept closed for 2 decades had finally opened, not just to my home, but to us. Half a year passed. The seasons had shifted twice, and with them, so had the rhythm of my life. The phone no longer rang with accusations or whispered gossip. The family group chats were mostly back to photos of babies, recipes, and the occasional vacation brag. People who had once condemned me now sent polite, meaningless messages, testing the waters, I suppose, to see if they were welcome again. Most of them weren't. Eric arrived on a crisp spring afternoon, letting himself in with the key I'd given him after Priya's arrest. I'd just come back from the market, and the scent of fresh tulips filled the penthouse. He looked different. The sharp tension in his jaw was gone, replaced by something calmer, steadier. His clothes were casual, no more of the over-tailored suits Priya had insisted on, but he wore them like a man finally comfortable in his own skin. It's done, he said as soon as he stepped inside, hanging his coat neatly over the back of a chair. I set the tulips in a vase. The divorce. He nodded. Signed, sealed, finalized. She signed the last papers yesterday. I poured coffee for both of us. And the sentencing? He sat down across from me, his hands wrapped around the warm mug. 6 months in prison. 3 years probation. Court-ordered restitution for legal costs and damages. He let out a breath. It's not everything she cost us, but it's something. Justice rarely restores everything, I said, sliding his cup toward him. But it stops the thief from stealing again. He smiled faintly. It's strange. For the first time in years, I don't wake up bracing for a fight. I can breathe without checking over my shoulder. After a pause, he said, "There's something else." I arched a brow. "Oh, I've met someone." I stayed silent, waiting. She's a teacher, Rebecca. History. We met at a charity fundraiser for literacy programs. He smiled as he spoke her name, and it wasn't the forced, performative smile I'd seen so often during his marriage to Priya. She doesn't know anything about all this. He gestured toward the penthouse, meaning the fortune, the long years of deception, and the mess of the past. Do you plan to tell her? I asked. Eventually, he said. but I want to know her first. I want her to know me before she knows about the money. I lean back in my chair. Eric, love and manipulation can feel identical at the start. Both can make you feel chosen, valued, wanted. But one pulls you closer and makes you stronger. The other binds you and drains you. The trick is seeing the difference before it's too late. He nodded slowly, listening. And another thing, I continued, if you want this to work, you need to be yourself from the start. No pretending to be less than you are. No shrinking so someone else feels bigger. He looked at me for a moment, then gave a half smile. And you? Will you be yourself too? No more little tests. I exhaled, a small laugh escaping me. No more tests. She'll meet the real me, the mother who lives here, who has made mistakes, who's learned what matters. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking. He told me about Rebecca, her dry humor, her obsession with medieval history, the way she stayed late at school to help students who struggled. I told him about a new art piece I was considering buying, about a book club I'd joined, about how I'd started playing the piano again after years of silence. There was no shadow in the room, no unspoken tension. As the sun began to set, he said, "We agree then?" Honesty from the beginning. No games. I lifted my cup in a toast. To starting over, properly this time. He clinked his mug against mine. To starting over. When he left, the penthouse felt different, not empty, but peaceful. The skyline glowed outside the windows, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of uncomplicated happiness. Priya was gone. The damage she'd done would leave scars, yes, but not unhealed wounds. And my son, free from her shadow, was finally finding his way back to himself. And maybe, just maybe, so was I. Summer crept into the city slowly that year, the kind of season where the light lingered long into the evening and the air carried the faint scent of blooming linden trees. It had been 6 months since Priya's sentencing, and the city felt quieter, calmer, like it was matching my own state of mind. That's when the calls began. The first was from Helena, my cousin on my mother's side. Her voice shook so much I could almost hear her twisting her wedding ring as she spoke. "Valeria, I owe you an apology." I didn't question anything she said. I just believed it. I thought I was protecting Eric, but I see now I was helping her hurt you. "I'm so sorry." I accepted the apology. What else could I do? But I didn't offer false comfort. "Thank you for saying that, Helena," I told her. It means something to hear it. The next day, my nephew Daniel from San Diego called. His tone was awkward, hesitant. "And Val, I got caught up in the drama. She made it sound like you were cruel, like you were hiding things from Eric." I didn't check the facts. I just joined the chorus. I'm embarrassed. There was also Aunt Frances, who had been Priya's most vocal supporter. "I was wrong," she admitted, her voice tight. "I misjudged you." The calls kept coming, each a variation of "I didn't know the whole story" or "I can't believe I fell for it." I listened to everyone. I accepted their words, and in most cases, I told them I appreciated the apology. But as each conversation ended, I knew something unshakable. Some relationships would never return to what they were. Trust is not a door you can fling open again just because someone knocks. It is a tapestry, and once torn, it must be rewoven thread by thread. And not everyone has the patience or the will to do that work. One hot afternoon, I was watering the plants on the balcony when my phone buzzed with a text from Detective Harris. "Detective Harris, Mrs. Montrose, thought you should know Talia attempted to send you a letter from prison. We intercepted it. It's in the evidence file, but I doubt you'd want to read it." I stood there for a long moment, the watering can in my hand, the sound of traffic drifting up from 37 floors below. Then I typed back, "Thank you. Please keep it there." It wasn't anger I felt, it was nothing. A blessed, steady nothing. No tug of dread in my stomach. No restless anticipation that she might somehow strike again. For the first time in 3 years, there was only stillness. It was peace, quiet, solid, and entirely mine. That night, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, the air warm and scented faintly with the day's heat. The city sprawled out before me, lights blinking to life one by one. I thought about the last few years, the secrecy, the games, the silent tests I'd set for people. I thought about the fortress I had built, not just in brick and glass, but in my own mind. It had kept me safe, yes, but it had also kept me hidden. And now there was no reason to hide. I'd made my decision earlier that week. I would sell this penthouse to Darren, an old friend of Louise's. He had always loved this place, and I knew he would treat it with the care it deserved. The penthouse had been my refuge, my stronghold, and yes, my trap. It was the stage for my long, quiet battle. But battles end, and it was time to step onto new ground. As the clock crept toward midnight, I realized something simple and profound. I wasn't just ready to live again. I was ready to live without masks, without tests, without wondering who might turn on me next. For the first time in years, I was walking into the future not with suspicion, but with an open hand. And that, I thought as I sipped the last of my wine, was the sweetest victory of all. The sun was sliding toward the opposite rooftop, spilling warm gold across the living room, when I finally sat down and allowed myself to remember it all without bitterness. 3 years of pretending to be a poor woman. It had been my longest and most difficult performance, both for others and for myself. At times I wondered if I'd gone too far, if I'd cut myself off from the world too completely. But now, looking back, I saw clearly that choice had saved my son. If I had lived openly, as I always had before, Priya would have found a way to entangle herself in our finances, bleed Eric dry, and leave him with nothing. My silence, my modest apartment, my worn coats, and absence of luxury, they had all been my armor. The mask I wore forced her to reveal her true face. I thought of Luis. His laughter on our terrace on lazy weekends, the coffee cups between us, the smell of fresh pastries he brought from the bakery each morning. We had built this legacy together, the businesses, the properties, the investments, and I knew he would have approved of how I protected it. We'll never let what we've earned fall into the wrong hands, he used to say. And I had kept that promise. Now, my son was free. He had begun a new chapter, and for the first time in many years, he had a real chance at happiness without anyone's shadow hanging over him. I saw the way his shoulders straightened when he spoke about his plans and how hope had returned to his voice. And me? I no longer needed to hide. The mask was gone, and before me lay a clean, unmarked canvas. I would return to the world of business, but not with the cold caution that had guided me in recent years. This time, it would be the choice of a woman who had already won her battles, who understood the value of her victories. I would be that Valeria again, confident, independent, respected, and still, above all, a loving mother who would fight for what mattered. I stepped out onto the balcony and inhaled the warm scent of a summer evening. The city below pulsed with life, and I realized that my life was once again fully my own. I had won this game. Not because I had brought down those who betrayed me, but because I had protected those I loved and stayed true to myself. Ahead lay plans, projects, meetings, and perhaps even new love. I didn't know exactly where this next chapter would lead, but I knew one thing for certain. This time, I would live openly, without fear, and entirely on my own terms. My life was beginning again.